The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this 36th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Moria Federation webinars, then webinar series in progress. Right up there at the top of the page, easy to find. Both this and the Secret Teaching series are also now available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald Secret Doctrine or Secret Teachings, and it should pop right up. Here we go. There we go. Got behind. Okay, well, we'll start by checking in on HPB's travels as described in old diary leaves. Last month, we read about Colonel Olcott, who during a solo speaking tour in southern Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, suddenly found himself able to heal the physically infirm. As we'll discover in this reading, the more people Olcott healed, the more his healing powers seemed to increase. So let's pick up the story where we left off last month. Can we get, well, this will be two readers, so just a reader for this page, please.
Okay, Joe, can you read that for us? And then Yvonne, I'm going to put you up after Joe, okay?
Which Joe?
You, please.
All right. Vadagama is a noted center of missionary activity, and so far as I was concerned, and Buddhism generally, of malevolence. It was the view of this lovely landscape, so it is said, which suggested to Bishop Heber the opening verse of his immortal missionary hymn. There had been threats that the missionaries were going to attack me at my lecture there, and the Buddhists naturally thronged to hear me. Several of our members came out of Gala, and whom should I see there but Cornelius Apu, the first person Olcott cured. He'd been half paralyzed, who had walked the whole 12 miles. No doubt then as to his having been cured. The gentle missionaries were conspicuous by their absence, and I had the huge audience all to myself. I was amused by a case that came under my hands at the little hamlet of Agalia. An old, wrinkled native woman of 72 years of age had been kicked by a buffalo cow while milking some years before, had to walk with a staff, and could not stand erect. She was a comical old creature and laughed heartily when I told her that I should soon make her dance. But after only 10 minutes of passes down her spine and limbs, she was almost as good as new, and I seized her hand, threw away her staff, and made her run with me over the lawn. My next patient was a boy of 7 years, whose hands could not be closed on account of a constriction of the tendons of the backs. I cured him in 5 minutes, and he went straight away to where the breakfast was ready for the family, and fell to eating rice with his right hand, now quite restored. In due time, I got back to the Gala headquarters, where a second siege by the sick had to be undergone. I have noted down an incident which shows the uncharitable and selfish spirit which actuates some of the medical profession, happily not all, with regard to the curing of patients by unpaid outsiders. For remember, I never took a farthing for all these cures.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, reader to finish up, please.
A number of former patients of the Galway General Hospital who had been discharged as incurable came to me and recovered their health, and naturally went to shouting the news on the housetops, so to say. The medical profession could not very well remain blind or indifferent to such a thing. And one day my doings with my patients were overlooked by one of the civil surgeons of the district. On that day, 100 patients presented themselves, and I treated 23, making, as I see it noted, some wonderful cures. Dr. K, recognizing one of the men, brought him to me with a remark that he had been pronounced incurable after every treatment had failed, and he would like to see what I could make of him. What I made was to enable the sick man to walk about without a stick for the first time in 10 years. The doctor frankly and generously admitted the efficacy of the mesmeric treatment and remained by me all day, helping me to diagnose and doing the duties of a hospital assistant. We were mutually pleased with each other, and at parting it was agreed that he should come to the next day after breakfast and help me in whatever way he could. He himself was suffering from a stiff ankle or something about his foot, I forget just what, which I relieved. The next day he neither came nor sent any word. The mystery was explained by a note he wrote to the mutual friend who had introduced him to me. It seems that on leaving me, full of enthusiasm about what he had seen, as any open-minded, unspoiled young man would naturally be, he went straight to the chief medical officer and reported. His superior coldly listened, and when he had finished, delivered himself of the sentence of excommunication on me. I was a charlatan. This pretended healing was a swindle. The patients had been paid to lie, and the young doctor was forbidden to have anything more to do with me or my money tricks. To clench the argument, he warned the other that if he persisted in disregarding his orders, he would run the risk of losing his commission. And if he could find that I took any fee, he would have me prosecuted for practicing medicine without a license.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the focus should remain on the extraordinary healing that Olcott was able to make happen. The rest is pretty predictable, the reaction. Okay. We are at the tail end of HPB's commentary on stanza 4, verse 5, which, if you might remember, details the 4 progressive aspects of Oiaohu. By way of review, let's reread the first half of this final paragraph, and then we'll take a look. So could we get a reader for this part in, let's see if you can see my cursor, this part that starts with the breath, the dark. And just read the dark part.
Martha, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. Thank
Sure.
you.
The breath of all the 7 is said to be Bhaskara, light-making, because they, the planets, were all comets and suns in their origin. They evolve into Manvantaric life from primeval chaos, now the noumenon of irresolvable nebulae, by aggregation and accumulation of the primary differentiations of the eternal matter, according to the beautiful expression in the commentary. Quote, thus the sons of light clothed themselves in the fabric of darkness, unquote. They are called allegorically, quote, the heavenly snails, unquote, on account of their, to us, formless intelligences inhabiting unseen their starry and planetary homes, and, so to speak, carrying them as the snails do along with themselves in their revolution.
Thank you, Martha. Any thoughts or questions about this reading? As discussed last time, key to understanding the light-making qualities of Bhaskara is, you'll see it there highlighted at the end of the verse, is a grasp of the relationship between breath and light. Cosmic breath incubates space, coaxing the cosmic matrix into activity until, as stated in stanza 3, verse 2, darkness radiates light, and light drops one solitary ray into the waters, into the mother deep. Substantive diversity is then brought forth through the 7 voweled logos. In this process, breath and sound are closely interrelated. So since we went through this section phrase by phrase during our last section, let's move on to the last half of this paragraph. If you're interested, you can look at the recording for webinar 35 for this, for an in-depth analysis of this. So if we could get a reader for this paragraph, please.
Michael, can you read that for us, please?
The doctrine of a common origin for all the heavenly bodies and planets was, as we see, inculcated by the archaic astronomers before Kepler, Newton, Leibniz, Kant, Herschel, and Laplace. Heat, the breath, attraction, and repulsion, the 3 great factors of motion, are the conditions under which all the members of all this primitive family are born, developed, and die, to be reborn after a night of Brahma, during which eternal matter relapses periodically into its primary undifferentiated state. The most attenuated gases can give no idea of its nature to the modern physicist. Centers of forces, at first, the invisible sparks of primordial atoms, differentiate into molecules and become suns, passing gradually into objectivity, gaseous, radiant, cosmic, the one whirlwind or motion, finally giving the impulse to the form, and the initial motion regulated and sustained by the never-resting breaths, the Dzyan Johans.
Thanks, Michael. So the common origin for the heavenly bodies, well, what's going on here? There we go. Common origin for all the heavenly bodies is svabhava, the 1 and 9 listed above, for it takes both spirit and noumenal matter to initiate manifestation, a fact recognized by archaic astronomers who were versed in the wisdom teachings. That's the point she's making, that in modern astronomy, we've lost that recognition of the wisdom teachings. So next up, heat, the breath, attraction, and repulsion are the 3 great factors of motion. Initially, the great breath incubates space. Then breath, expressing itself as heat, which is one of the 7 sons of Fohat, becomes the active, life-sustaining emanation. The second and third qualities of motion, attraction and repulsion, that fundamental duality, determine how spirit and matter interact. Under the agencies of Brahma and Shiva, these 2 forces are responsible for the creation and dissolution of worlds, ceasing to function only in periods of pralaya, when, quote, eternal matter relapses periodically into its primary undifferentiated state. Let's take a look at an excerpt from the Theosophical Glossary entry on attraction and repulsion, which directly references this passage. Can we get a reader for this, please?
Yes. Karsten, will you do that? And you can ask your question. Okay,
If you want to start with your question, that's fine, Carson.
It was just, what is the 7? I don't get it.
I'm sorry, what's that? You were asking, what are the 7?
Yes, in the passage before.
Right, let's see. Yeah, the 7.
Breed of all the 7 is said to be Bhaskara. It's the 7 before in front of the throne, or what?
Yeah, well, yes, that's actually correct. Of course, that doesn't tell us much in terms of their nature. It depends at what level you're looking. In our solar system, it's these 7 sacred planets, which are the 7 ray lords, not so much as planets, but as ray lords. But in every differentiation, you have a unity, and then you have a 7-fold demonstration of that unity. So, for instance, the cosmic physical plane is a singularity. It's, you know, it's all the cosmic physical plane, and it's broken into 7 planes, and those have ray relationships as well. So this is just the Brahma, who is the creator of the universe, or what DK calls the third logos, does so by manifesting as 7-fold. So for that reason, he's called the 7 in 1.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So if you would read this, that'd be great.
Yes. Attraction and repulsion. 2 forces ever in operation during periods of manifested activity. In the Secret Doctrine 103, 3 great universal causes of manifestation are named in connection with intelligent cosmic motion, namely the breath, love, or attraction, and hate or repulsion, the latter being merely polar antitheses of the same underlying cosmic energy. Through the interaction of these 3 universes and worlds come into being, have the periods of manvataric growth, and finally decay and disappear, only to reappear after a period of rest or pralaya. A capital mistake made by modern science and philosophy, producing momentaneous consequences in theory, has been the arbitrary division of natural forces into disjunct and unrelated energies. All forces of nature originally spring from a common source, a cosmic spiritual unit, which is the heart of the nature itself, and hence it is no more possible to divorce attraction from its alter ego, repulsion, than it would to have a stick which has only one end. Okay.
Thank you. Any thoughts or questions about this? I take exception with the idea that hate is somehow inextricably linked to repulsion, as the latter can also occur, for instance, through radiation. In fact, the doors that guard the thresholds for initiation are set up to repulse someone who approaches it if they're not ready. So it's not inherently having to do with hate. That repulsion demonstrates on all planes. Hate is repulsion demonstrating on the lower astral. Okay. In this final sentence of commentary on verse 5, HPB describes basically the entire involutional process. Invisible cosmic force centers reawaken the great lives, which through Fohat become suns on the inner side, passing only gradually into gaseous radiant objectivity by means of what's called the fiery whirlwind, the Oe-ha-hu, all regulated and sustained by the never-resting breaths, the Dzyan Chohans. Excuse me. Any thoughts or questions? Any thoughts or questions about this commentary? Okay, let's revisit the verse itself. First off, verse 4 and 5 form a continuum with Oe-a-ohu at the pivotal point. In fact, the sentence that bridges the 2 verses shown here starts in verse 4 and goes well into verse 5. Nidana a title of Brahma, is the first cause, being, quote, the cosmic living aggregate of vital bonds forming the universe into an organic whole. And this is Oya-Ohu. This is followed by a further description of Oya-Ohu that begins with verse 5 proper. The first line of which gives us 5 descriptors of the same state of being. Darkness, the boundless, no number, Adi Nidana Svabhavat, the circle, which we're told stands for X, the unknown quantity. So, darkness is the original super-spiritual intelligence substance of the universe, which is sometimes called absolute light, the source of manifested light. Darkness is Father, Mother, light, the sun, the refulgent glory. It shares with the boundless and no number the qualities of negation. Those of you who've been with this series since the beginning might remember how stanza 1 spoke in terms of negatives. Time was not, universal mind was not, the 7 ways to bliss were not. It was constructed this way because no positive statement about what is was possible. As verse 6 of stanza 1 states, not was. Though Oya-Ohu is not the absolute, it is nevertheless beyond all perception and so is described as darkness. That's the boundless. Just as infinity doesn't mean a really long time, boundless doesn't mean really big. Rather, it connotes a condition totally beyond dimensionality. The same is true of no number. Stanza 4, verse 1 states, all is one number issued from no number. All is one number issued from no number, alluding to a condition beyond uniqueness, beyond the singularity of oneness, and beyond any unification of separated parts. Next on the list, we have Adi Nidana Svabhavat. Adi means original, primary, or causal. Nidana is the, quote, aggregate of vital bonds, which the Buddhists call the 12 causes of manifested existence. Thus, Adi Nidana is the original link in a succeeding chain of vital bonds. Svabhavat means self-generating. Thus, Adi Nidana Svabhavat means the self-generating original link that results in a succeeding chain of vital bonds. Let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary entry on Adi Nidana Svabhavat. Could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Karen, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
Okay. Adi Nidana Svabhavat. Sanskrit, from Adi first, primordial, plus Nidana, causation, plus Svabhavat, self-being, self-becoming, from Sva, self, plus the verbal root bu, to be, become. Primordial causation of self-becoming. In Buddhist thought, Nidana also signifies primal essence or substance, and Svabhavat is equated with the father-mother of manifestation. The term could be translated primordial causality, essence, father-mother. It is the highest portion of the manifesting or third logos of our galaxy, and because the third logos of every solar system is a reflection of the galactic third logos, the Adi Nidana Svabhavat of any solar system is within its ring pass not identical to the Adi Nidana Svabhavat of the galaxy. The phrase occurs in the stanzas of Dzyan, darkness, the boundless, or the no number, Adi Nidana Svabhavat from the Secret Doctrine, 198, which as the summit of the third logos can be rendered as darkness and no number, since it is darkness to human intellect and yet the beginning of numeration of all hierarchies that flow forth from it. Hence, for all beneath it, Adi Nidana Svabhavat may likewise be called the boundless, signifying the cosmic essence or spiritual substance without restricting frontiers.
Thanks, Karen. Okay. Any thoughts or questions about this quote? The fact that Adi Nidana Svabhavat is the highest portion of the third logos identifies this being's essence as the primordial cause, as well as the all-encompassing potential of whatever, as you know, is pointed out here, of whatever ring pass not, it's the Adi Nidana Svabhavat of. So if it's the entire the entire universe or multiverse, then it is the primordial cause of, at its highest portion, of all existence, and at the same time it's total potential of all existence. But as he points out, you also have this quality, this beingness for every level of ring pass not, you know. So it exists for a galaxy, it exists for a solar system, and smaller and larger ring paths knots of identity, you could say. So finally, for the circle, we'll go back to page 11 of the Secret Doctrine. If we could get a reader for this, please.
Yes, Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
The one is an unbroken circle, ring, with no circumference, for it is nowhere and everywhere. The one is the boundless plane of the circle, manifesting a diameter only during the monthly periods. The one is the indivisible point found nowhere, perceived everywhere during those periods. It is the vertical and the horizontal, the father and the mother, the summit and the base of the father, the two extremities of the mother, reaching in reality nowhere, for the one is the ring, as also the rings that are within that ring. Light and darkness and light, the breath which is eternal.
Thanks, Lynn. Any thoughts or questions about this?
Hold on, I think I have a question. Brian asked, does this have anything to do with the sign Pisces?
Does what have anything to do with sign Pisces?
Here, let me unmute him, if I can find the right one. Okay, you're self-muted, Brian. You want to define your question?
Yeah, the last thing that we were talking about previously, the previous paragraph, I was curious if any of that sort of like unmanifested light, sort of boundless principle, I was wondering if much of that had to do with, or anything to do with the sign Pisces to any extent.
Is this what you're talking about? Probably so.
Nature. No, I think it was one after that.
Okay, that's the last thing we did. Let me go out of and get back up here.
But anyway, yeah, it was kind of like this stuff, and it was talking about almost like how something is coming almost like out of nothing with no number.
Right.
And it reminds me of sort of like, you know, the sun, or sort of like, I don't know, for some reason it brings them out to my mind like Leah.
Yeah.
Like Leah rising out of Pisces or something, you know, for some reason, you know, you think of something dark and watery, like the boundless deep.
Oh, yeah,
And then you think of something ascending from that's either like a newborn son, like form, like, sort of how like Leo has kind of a triplicity of three sons to an extent in a form of ascension, but it seems like it first rises out of water, which seems to me to represent the very first principle of joining and understanding the mother and father principle, which the father principle to some extent is associated with Pisces itself due to the love of love wisdom and the power of the father and the will to bring that love wisdom into manifestation, which kind of seems like it takes you to Virgo, which is, at the opposition of that. And so that's kind of how I was thinking about it.
I see. Well, this is, there's definitely a relationship between darkness and what's called the primeval deep, which are also called the great dark waters. And this is related, of course, it's all symbolic because our language is at this level is completely limited to actually describe it, because it's also called absolute light, because it's the source of this darkness. But because it is out of this place, and all of these relate, all these are one, all these five descriptors are one. It's both the source from the point of view of the impulsing spirit and the source as the substantive, really before substance, but the source of substance, which is what the feminine aspect, the dark waters, represents. It's the primordial sea out of which all arises. So in that sense, there is a relationship because of the Piscean mother deep aspect. But one thing about Pisces is it tends to represent relationship of one stage of becoming to another. And that's a universal, you can apply that universally, from personality to soul, right up the ladder, right? You have this quality of relationship that occurs as spirit matter is a relationship, right? So in that sense, your intuition is on kicking in with that.
Okay, all right, great. Because I've written a lot of stuff in regards to that recently. So, but anyway, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Okay, let's see. We've done that. We read the circle.
And Lisa wants to know, is this similar to the concept of sunyata or emptiness in Buddhism?
Yes. Well, it's primordial to that. It stands in the microcosm. It would be, in other words, if you apply this to human consciousness, it would be. But this is a stage of being that is even before gods, even before any singularity that could be called, for instance, God or the Logos or whatever. It's a stage of it's the very first stage of manifestation where all is still pure potential and therefore at totally causal levels. Everything is still homogeneous. There is no diversification at all, including the enlightened state of being that could be called emptiness. Even that has not yet manifested, right? But of course, on the microcosmic level, they're very akin. They're very much related, as long as you see what scope you're looking at. Anyone else? Anything else?
No, that's all we got right now.
Okay. So these five, darkness, the boundless, the no number, the Adinadanas, and the circle, are descriptors of the same coeval, which means occurring at the same time, substanding reality, the unmanifest, oiaohu, right? I could have sworn earlier in Secret Doctrine it was called Oya Ohu the Elder, but I went looking for it and couldn't find it. So that's maybe just something I made up. I don't know. It's that source of all, right? But not the all. It's not the diversified all, but the source of that. Okay, it gets easier to talk about when you move to this stage with Adi Sanat. So no number self-creates the one. Oya Ohu, the younger, thus marking the beginning of the descent into manifestation. So let's take a look at the Theosophical Glossary's entry on Adi Sanat. A reader, please.
Carrie, can you read that for us, please? Yourself. There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Adi Sanat, Sanskrit. From Adi, first, plus Sanat, from of old, always. The ever primeval one, a name applied to Brahma. In the stanzas of Dzyan, it expresses that which preceded Svabhavat in cosmic evolution. First there was no number, then Adi Sanat, the number for he is one. Then Svabhavat, the numbers, Secret Doctrine 198, comparable to the Kabbalistic Attika de Attiken, the ancient of ancients of the Zohar, also to the Pythagorean cosmic monad, which, born in and from the womb of ever-enduring or no number, manifests itself as the source of the cosmos and retires into silence and darkness, retaining its own condition while acting as the ineffable source from which all manifestation hangs as a pendant in the spaces of space. Again, Adi Sanat is the ever-enduring germ of cosmic mind, and because it lasts from cosmic Manvantara to cosmic Manvantara, sinking merely into periods of non-manifestation during the cosmic pralayas, it is named the primeval ancient, the ever primeval one.
Thanks, Carrie. So any thoughts or questions on Adi Sanat? It's important to realize that it manifests itself as the source of the cosmos, but does not further manifest. In other words, its condition or position as the one is as the source, but not any manifested cosmos itself. So therefore you have this sentence, manifests itself as a source of cosmos and retires into silence and darkness. Retaining that condition of unmanifest while acting as the ineffable, unknowable source. Right. So it's very difficult, of course, to gain any true understanding of these conditions, because even if you are a master of wisdom, the level of becoming that this represents beyond that stage is practically infinite. So we do the best we can with language. The main focus here being that whereas that first stage of Oya Ohu, which was no number, was, you could say, the field of homogeneity and pure spirit, this is the first singularity, but still is itself only a source, not it doesn't enter the realm of thingness at all, of for instance, individuality, not at this stage. Okay.
Francis?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Brian says they say esoteric astrology develops the eye of Brahma.
Wow, yeah, I could see why they would say that indeed. Yeah, the all-knowing eye. That's one of the keys, esoteric astrology, because it's the source of the energies available to us in our development. So it would certainly open that. It would be one of the keys for certain. So, as quote, the number who issued forth from no number, Arisanat is the first singularity, but still purely causal, containing within itself the as yet unexpressed diversity. So, next.
Okay, and
Go ahead.
we have a hand up. Go ahead, Robert.
Hi. As we go through this material, something keeps coming to me. I know we talk about this as having been written by HPB, but in the Initiation of Human and Solar, DK introduces himself before it was known that he was the one writing the books as I'm paraphrasing, as the one who dictated a large part of the momentous book, The Secret Doctrine. And it seems like in the opening of Cosmic Fire, he kind of does a simplification and rewrite for clarity of a lot of this material. And something that I've always wondered about, because he talks about the absolute being beyond the range and reach of any human thought or expression. Would you consider the writing of a master, of the wisdom as being, even though it's in language, human thought or expression?
Well, that's a very provocative question. First of all, Master of Wisdom is a human being. He's at that level of the perfected human being, representing basically as far as you can go within the human kingdom. He's fully integrated with fully integrated personality and soul, and is in the process of integrating his monad into that stage of becoming truly one with the true self, right? So that's his stage of becoming. So anything written by a master of wisdom, what becomes the block is language, rather than any level of cognizance of that master, right? And one of the things that DK bemoans throughout the books is how limiting and even distorting the language is. He has something to express, and no matter how skilled that expression may be, it still distorts the truth, because language, especially English, is so inherently materialistic in its orientation, right? So you have that aspect. Now, in terms of the two sources, HPB would be the first one to say that she was just the amanuensis of those who worked through her. She didn't write the material any more than Alice Bailey wrote the DK material. From what I remember, there were 6 sources that worked through her. 5 of them masters, 1 of them DK, and he was a primary source for her, in the creation of the Secret Doctrine, particularly. In the as you mentioned, the Treatise on Cosmic Fire is, you could say, the update and tremendous expansion on the Secret Doctrine, right? And there is a clarification. If you look at the fundamental postulates in the beginning, the very first pages, I think it's I think it might be page 1. He lists what we're going through. And the main thing he does is he strips the Sanskrit out, right? But he also he's more pragmatic. He doesn't explore these levels that we're looking at now to any great extent, because his purpose was not to do so. He often would say, well, I could further describe this, but it would take another treatise the size of Cosmic Fire, and it would have no practical value to do so, right? So it's not really HPB, as this very unusual woman who lived in the 19th century, as opposed to the decay. It's more the fact that the message was honed, and whereas she worked with a half a dozen sources, masters, plus libraries that would literally precipitate in front of her vision. She saw etherically much of her sources. Interestingly, I've because of the internet, I'm able to pull up much of her source material, and stuff that she looked at etherically still reads word for word as she described it. But she had a tiny little library in her house, so she certainly didn't have all that reference material available to her. It's quite interesting. Well, that was a little bit of a rambling response, but I hope that helped.
No, it is. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Okay, let's see, where are we? Next, the voice of the Lord Svabhavat. Notice it's once removed. It's not Lord Svabhavat here. It's the voice of the Lord Svabhavat. The numbers with an S, for he is 1 and 9. As Father, Mother, Svabhavat is that state of cosmic consciousness where spirit and matter become one, from which emerges those creative potencies called the numbers, the 9 of potential diversity. But Svabhavat itself never descends from its own plane, remaining forever the cosmic reservoir of being and beings, therefore of consciousness. The distinguishing quality of Svabhavat is that of self-becoming. The agency of this becoming is the, quote, voice of the Lord Svabhavat. So, this further stage is really articulated by the fact of that voice. You could say the 1 of the 1 and 9 in Svabhavat is identical to Adi Sanat, except for now it is the combination of 1 and 9, meaning all that can be, all potential, and as well as the delivery mechanism, the voice, which, the logos just means voice. So this is a true place of logos. De Perucker, this great esotericist of the 20s and 30s, described the effect of this voice as the spirit force arising into activity within the seeds of beingness and forcing its way down into the lower life of manifestation, not pushing or moved by anything outside of itself. So he's focusing on how this self-generation occurs, right? Self-becoming. Any thoughts or questions? So next up, 3, the formless square, Arupa. This is, in all my reading and referencing, I was never able to get an absolute fix on the quality of this, but I can talk about it, and some of that will be around it. This is the way it is. The square is ever the symbol of the cosmos, first arupa or unmanifest, then manifest. Here's an illustration that symbolizes the genesis described in this verse from Svabhavat to cosmos. Adi Sanat might be symbolized by the canvas on which this illustration is described, is drawn. It's the paper behind this illustration. Then from Svabhavat, the unmanifested point, representing the unity of spirit matter, the first duality issues forth. And from their relationship, the sun, the second or solar principle, is born. the refulgent glory, forming the primordial triangle. He is the 7 in 1, from which issue forth the 7 Prajapatis, who transform formlessness into cosmos. I think the formless square also has something to do with the 4 Lapika lords that formulate and project the latent plan by which the cosmos manifests, an idea that HPB develops in the next verse, and we'll be looking at that. So any thoughts or questions about the formless square? Okay, next. And these 3 enclosed within the circle are the sacred 4. Just a few pages back, HPB states, the triad forms within the circle the tetractys, or sacred 4, the square within the circle being the most potent of all the magical figures. So, we might ask, how does the square manifest through the tetractys? One way is through the outline of the cube made by the 6 points that surround the central point. This illustration of a cube may help you visualize this idea. Here's one way of inscribing a square within a circle. And when we internally connect the points, we have the equal arm cross within the circle, which is the symbol of the 3rd logos, the subject of this whole verse. Philosophically, we get a square from the tetractys through extension of the 4 points of its baseline. The sacred 4 can also be indicated by the outer 3 points of the triangle and the center point, which when connected gives us an orthogonic view of the 4-sided tetrahedron, representing the first extension of form into 3D space. Orthogonic just means a straight-on view that formally identifies a figure. So, why is the square within the circle the, quote, most potent of all the magical figures? One purely geometrical reason is that all the Platonic solids, which represent all diversity, can be formed from the cube of space that arises from the heart of the tetractys. Philosophically, the circle represents the influence and realm of pure spirit, the boundless all. The square has many interrelated meanings, from the sacred 4 as described in this verse, to the symbol of the earth and the world of form, to the Lapika formulated plan of deity. The square being completely enclosed within the circle suggests either unmanifested potential or a vehicle, such as a planet or an incarnated personality, completely dominated by and subservient to spirit. Thus, microcosmically, the square within the circle could represent the consecrated initiate. While addressing a related subject, HPB says, it is the magical agent par excellence and designates in Hermetic philosophy life infused into primordial matter, the essence that composes all things and the spirit that determines their form. This passage from the 2nd volume, The Secret Doctrine, states, the circle is the thought, the diameter is the word, and their union is life. So, one path of descent, using these geometric elements, could be described thusly. Through the word activated potency of the diameter, the circumscribed square is reflected into the cube of space and time. While we're on the subject, another well-known combination of square and circle is called squaring the circle. In this figure, the circle and square have either an equal circumference or an equal area. Using the equal circumference model, the Great Pyramid exemplifies this ratio with its height representing the radius of the circle and its base perimeter, the square. This is very Libran ratio, suggesting in the case of the pyramid, a place where spirit and form meet. This was certainly in the mind of those master architects who designed the pyramid as a series of chambers for initiation. HPB describes the importance of this ratio. Can we get a reader, please?
Sure, but first you've got some questions here from Brian. And Brian, I'm going to ask you to read when we're done with the questions. I'll go ahead and read your question, though. He says, I think the key for me has been to translate all esoteric astrology into the ancient Egyptian gods so that astrology becomes less of a broken, fragmented mathematics and symbols to more of a science of relationships that develops gradually with more light from the stars. And he says, how do you know it's not a diamond? It's not a diamond instead of a square. I think it is a diamond surrounding an eye that takes one into the depths. Okay, so let me unmute you now, Brian. How many of you are there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
The only reason I said that is because I had an amazing experience a long time ago when we are looking at symbology that relates really directly to Egypt with all of the triangles, which if you do those, they can turn into diamonds. But what I wanted to point out is that a long time ago when I was meditating, I'm the only person that I know of that I have actually seen a real living, breathing Egyptian angel. And she had a sphinx on the right side of her head. And on the left side of her head, she had the right side of her head was male with the eye of Horus on the upper right side. And a little bit lower on that, on her other side of her head, on the left side of her face, was a beautiful Egyptian woman. And over her left eye was a black diamond. And inside that black diamond was a black eye. I mean, it was just gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. But as you look at the left side of her face, it just drew you in. The feminine energy just drew you totally in. And she was hovering in burning red flames, and her whole body was solid golden yellow, and her hair was being lifted up in yellow and orange, and her fists were turned upright into fists clenched very tightly. Where she was squeezing her fist was bright red, and then the bright red tapered off into an orange, and then the rest of her arms and her body was solid gold. And the only reason I bring that to bear is because you were talking about the symbol, and I'm the only one I know of that's seen a living, breathing sphinx. Yeah. So I thought I might share that because, I just thought I would share that because I thought it was very interesting, and I've been meditating on it, and it's brought me some very interesting things. So.
It sounds like you had an incredibly powerful experience. The difference between a diamond and a square is a diamond is as you mentioned, oriented towards the triangle. A diamond, of course, it's not a specific term like a square is. Square is a specific figure. A diamond could mean a lot of things, but geometrically, a diamond is two equilateral triangles. So if you had, for instance, these are not equilateral triangles. This upper triangle has the base of this upper triangle is longer than these sides, right? If this were equilateral, then it wouldn't fit inside a circle, so it would be a different figure. So a diamond that's the difference between the two. So it has a different symbolism. In fact, it tends to mean the higher and the lower. In fact, your figure is described with the left and right side and the male female symbols. If you combine the two triangles of a diamond overlapping, you have a 6-pointed star, one pointing up, one pointing down, which gives you that male female orientation or spirit matter, right? So that, you know, that's the difference.
I just thought I'd throw that out there. I just thought I'd throw that out there because the diamond in her case, both points went just a little bit beyond the left and right side of the eye on the width, but the diamond itself expanded a little bit further down her left side of her face and a little bit further up above her eye, obviously, in her eyebrow. So, but anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there. I thought it had some real deep, interesting symbolism.
Could you read this for us, please?
Yeah. See, I need to move this part here. Make it better. It says, and when we say human, this does not apply merely to our terrestrial humanity, but to the mortals that inhabit any world, whose intelligences that have reached the appropriate equilibrium between matter and spirit, as we have now, since the middle point of the fourth root race of the fourth round was passed.
Okay, thank you. So I want to back up a little bit to put this in the context that we were just discussing, which is we were looking at this ratio, which is the ratio of spirit, of the circle to the square, which is philosophically sort of universally considered to be the ratio of spirit to matter. Right. And so in the creation of initiatory chamber, you have thus created a place where spirit and matter can come together. That is to say, the source of yourself and your own personality. Right. And so what she's saying here is that those intelligences that have reached an appropriate equilibrium between spirit and matter, as she described this as literally the definition of a human being, right? And that this occurred in the this is actually a quote that we will be reading soon, but this happened in the Atlantean root race. So it's, you know, it's an interesting definition of a human being, this place of equilibrium between spirit and matter. Okay, so next up, and the 10 are the arupa, subjective or formless universe. There are 10 points in the Tetractys. 10 is arupa because it's the perfected potential conditioned by the synthetic 3. It is the father, mother, or 1 and 9 of Svabhavat. Let's reread this quote from HPB's commentary on verse 3 of stanza 4. Could we get a reader for this short quote?
Sure. Joe, can you read that for us, please?
Self-mute?
No, I'm not hearing her, so maybe she stepped away. Okay, I'll go ahead and read it. 10 is the mother of the soul. For life and light are therein united, says Hermes. For number 1 is born of the spirit, and the number 10 from matter, chaos, feminine. The unity has made the 10 the unity. Book of the Keys.
Thank you, Biel. So said another way, the deity, the ever-invisible presence, says the Zohar, manifests itself through the 10 Sephiroth, which are its radiating witnesses. I love that last phrase. Okay, next up. Then come the sons, the 7 fighters, the 1, the 8th left out. So those of you who were here last time, much of HPB's verse 5 commentary was spent on this part of the verse. We spent a lot of time in discussion of this idea. the seven fighters are, in our solar system, the seven sacred planets, fighting, we're told in the old commentary, for survival against the eighth, who is Martanda, our sun, who was then banished, quote unquote, to the center of our solar system. Finally, and his breath, which is the light maker, Bhaskara. For this, I'll just repeat what I said earlier on Bhaskara at the very beginning of this webinar. All substance is ultimately a condensation of light. Thus, breath is light making because it incubates space, coaxing the cosmic matrix into activity until, as stated in stanza 3, verse 2, darkness radiates light, and light drops one solitary ray into the waters, into the mother deep, which by means of the seven-vowed logos eventually precipitates the realm of substantive diversity. To again quote stanza 3, verse 5, the union produces the sapta, in whom are the seven, which become the tridasha, or the hosts and multitudes. Thoughts or questions on anything having to do with verse 5? This is the detailed, you could say the formal explication in old commentary language of the nature of this being who is Oya Ohu, right? Alrighty then, on to the much shorter last verse of the stanza. Verse 6, then the second seven, who are the Lapika, produced by the three, word, voice, and spirit. The rejected sun is one. The sun's sons are countless. Let's take a look at HPB's commentary. I'll read the first sentence, including the footnote. Then if we could have a reader from that point. Okay, the Lapika, from the word lipi, writing, means literally the scribes. And the footnote, these are the four immortals which are mentioned in Atharva Veda as the watchers or guardians of the four quarters of the sky. Okay, could we get a reader starting with the second sentence, which begins with mystically?
Go ahead, please, Scott.
Mystically, these divine beings are connected with karma, the law of retribution, for they are the recorders or analysts who impress on the, to us, invisible tablets of the astral light, the great picture gallery of eternity, a faithful record of every act and every thought of man, for all that was, is, or ever will be in the phenomenal universe. As said in Isis, this divine and unseen canvas is the book of life. As it is the Lapika who project into objectivity from the passive universal mind the ideal plan of the universe, upon which the builders reconstruct the cosmos after every pralaya. It is they who stand parallel to the seven angels of the presence, whom the Christians recognize as the seven planetary spirits, or the spirits of the stars. For thus it is they who are the direct amanuensis of the eternal ideation, or as called by Plato, the divine thought.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, any thoughts or questions on this first half? This is the Secret Doctrine's first mention of the Lapika Lords, which will be a recurring subject, especially throughout the upcoming stanza 5, and is also greatly expanded on by DK. So, we learn in the first sentence and footnote that the Lapika Lords are called scribes, immortals, watchers, and guardians of the four quarters of the sky. They are called scribes, we are told, because they faithfully record, quote, every act and even thought of man, of all that was, is, or ever will be in the phenomenal universe. Decay tells us that this recording is done by two groups of Lepika lords. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes. Brian has a question first, though. And then, Martha, I'm going to unmute you or for you to read it, okay? Brian says, are the seven planetary spirits the same seven fighters and suns as mentioned before?
Exactamundo. They are indeed. This is at that stage of formation where they were determining their own ring pass knots and their discrete separative beings, and as planetary bodies. But yeah, they're inhabited by the seven ray lords. Okay.
First,
a reader, please, for this.
The four Maharajas, the lesser Lepika lords, who apply past karma and work it out in the present. Second, the four Lepikas of the second group, referred to by HPB as occupied in applying future karma and wielding the future destiny of the races. The work of the first group of four cosmic Lepika lords is occult and is only revealed somewhat at the fourth initiation, and even then, but slightly. So it will not be touched upon here. Treatise on Cosmic Fire, page 112.
Thanks, Martha. So, you have to ask if those that work with the past are occult, what would you call those who work with future karma? It's open question there. Any thoughts or questions about this? Clearly, the Lepika are free from the constraints of sequential time. In a deeply esoteric passage, DK also addresses the idea that the Lepikas are, quote, guardians of the four quarters of the sky, the concept illustrated by the circumscribed equal-armed cross shown here. Can we get a reader for this DK quote?
Joe, can you read that for us, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Each plane is a vast sphere of matter, actuated by latent heat and progressing or rotating in one particular direction. Each ray of light, no matter of what color, is likewise a sphere of matter of the utmost tenuity, rotating in a direction opposite to that of the planes. In connection with these two types of spheres, we might, by way of illustration and for the sake of clarity, say that A, the planes rotate from east to west. B, the rays rotate from north to south. By means of this very interaction, the work of the four Maharajas, or lords of karma, is made possible. The quaternary, and all sum totals of four, can be seen as one of the basic combinations of matter produced by the dual revolutions of planes and rays. Treatise on Cosmic Fire, pages 152 to 153.
Thanks, Joe. Just FYI for everybody, no reason to read the attributions for these. I put them up there so that if you want to look them up, you can find them or jot them down. Okay. This teaching begs the question, what is the effect of this dual rotation? More specifically, how does it affect the human kingdom? One presumed result is a constant shift in numerical alignment, which would affect, even condition, all the four kingdoms of nature. But this begs an additional question. How fast is this dual rotation? Is it quite slow, aligned with the passage from one globe or root race to the next, or perhaps in accordance with the precession of the equinoxes, or more quickly, allowing the numerical alignments of plane and ray to shift in accordance with the astrological ages, thus making this dual rotation responsible for the change in ray influences from one astrological age to the next? Or is this double rotation even more rapid, changing the numerical alignments yearly, by sign, daily, or even hourly? Does this influence of this dual rotation contribute to the length of time that the rays are influential, as described here? Seems like it'd have to. So any thoughts or questions about this? And perhaps even more relevant?
Oh,
Yeah,
all right.
I figured there would be. Go ahead.
Brian asks, maybe it has more to do with each individual initiate and the horizon changes with new initiations and relationships developed.
Well, I think the effect on each initiate would change according to their own ray makeup and ray orientation. But I think this double rotation of planes and rays is demonstrable for the yeah, this is another question which I didn't ask. Is it just for this planet? Is it for the solar system? What ring past knot is being described here? Or is it, all 7 cosmic planes and rays? You could hardly imagine that it wouldn't be. If it happens locally, certainly it's going to be happening everywhere. So you could say that the entire universe is affected by this dual rotation.
And
any
then
other?
Brian says, I think those steps are written in methodology by those who went before.
I'm not sure what that means. Those steps. What do you mean by those steps?
Here, let me unmute him.
Yeah. Hello? Hello?
Yeah. Hi, yes.
Yeah, all I was thinking of is, like, for instance, so that it's a combination of not just the initiate, the microcosm, but so that it's also a universal process of, say, for instance, like, this is the way I think about it. Like, say, initiate, once he reaches a certain stage of understanding, in my belief, from what I've seen and just what I've witnessed, the horizon itself will change. But what I've also witnessed is that if you look at up some of the greatest minds that have written about mythology, it's almost like those stories that they have written speak about how the horizon will change because they've already been through those initiations. So it seems like the literature is already there to show how the horizon changes, not just with the initiate, but also in the universal planes as well. Through, I think the best way to see it is through mythology and ancient stories. But that was just an idea.
Interesting thought. Yeah, interesting thought that they could be descriptions of these various possible combinations.
Right.
So, does the influence of this dual rotation contribute to the length of time that these rays are influential? What about this? Does anybody have any thoughts on this? It seems to me that this could be a causal aspect to these periods of manifestation.
Okay. You have a number of hands up, but you also have a couple of comments here. Britta says, also relating to the rotation of the human chakras.
Interesting. Okay. I would say that this cosmic double rotation would have a definite and profound influence on the chakras. the rays that come into manifestation, and the planes which are affected by that manifestation would have a definite influence on the chakras. You know, even your time of incarnation, when a soul would choose to incarnate, would be affected by this dual rotation. Thing is, we don't have any information, right, about it other than this. So we can't really, you know, take it much further, but we can certainly speculate on it. Right.
And she adds, as above, so below.
Okay.
And then
There would be, yeah,
oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to go on to Karsten's comments, but
I was just going to say, you know, you would have a systemic, you know, the cosmic physical plane has 7 planes, and one, you know, it would seem suggested by this writing that those planes rotate, right? In this dual rotation. And then within that, you have another level of rotation, which would be all 7 cosmic planes. So you have rotations, you know, double rotations within greater dual rotations, right? Plus, just to make things a little hairier, whoops, let's get back here. Each plane is this vast sphere of matter. Each plane, right? So not just all 7, but each plane. And that it is each plane that rotates. So each plane can also be seen with its 7 subplanes, one would assume, since the cosmic physical plane is itself a subplane of the cosmic plane, of the 7 cosmic planes, that you have rotations within rotations and no telling where it stops. Certainly at the level of the subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, I would think this dual rotation would be going on, right?
Okay, we're getting lots of comments here. Britta also adds the rotation just not only in one circle, but like a ball of rotations. And I would just like to put a plug in. You know how you show where people can find your webinars there on the Moira Federation webinar, student webinars?
Right.
Dwayne Carpenter has done some webinars on this, on the planes moving in the circular motion and the polarities of them, and the fact that, you know, one goes east and west and the other goes north and south. So, and you can find it there on that same Moira Federation student webinar pages. He likes to take he likes to do exactly what Britt is talking about here and rotate that. You know, he puts them in his colors and then he rotates those colors, and then you see a visual of
the dual rotation.
Yeah, and what the end result looks like. And of course, you know, he also makes the point that even though we're categorizing these as individual layers of the planes, that they actually interpenetrate each other. So I just wanted to throw that out there too.
Right, indeed.
And
yeah.
We still
remember, there's spheres of influence, you know, not balls, you know, that are completely discrete. They're spheres of interpenetrating influence. Yeah.
Okay, and then yeah, I got more comments, and then we still have 2 hands up. So Karsten says, what about God's 4 faces which cannot be turned, like the head of the cherubs, angels, lion, the eagle, and Taurus, and angel, man?
Well,
he says the
4 faces of the fixed cross.
Right,
yeah.
the 4 Maharajas. And he doesn't.
Well, that's a perfect segue into this next part. which suggests that they are work with this rather than are of it. Okay, and we'll be looking at that. Let me take the other questions, and then I'll try to integrate that question with the content here in a minute.
Okay, okay. And he also adds the astrological wheel has east and in plane west, north in the bottom, and north in the top. I think he meant south in the top, but yeah, it's got the definite cardinal points and the stars. Okay, Scott, go ahead, and then Yvonne, I'll call on you in a minute. You're self-muted. There you go.
Yeah. I'm only thinking of I think that I like this interpenetrating idea and of it overlapping. Thinking of the numbers there, we know that some of the cycles for the rays are the numbers you're looking at. For instance, 6-ray has a 600-year cycle that we see in human time. So it would indicate if that's so, and we know that works for first ray, and there are certain numbers I suspect for each of the others that they're in major effect. Then the turning of the planes and the turning of the rays cannot be the same length of time. They're not moving regularly.
Right.
It's herky-jerky. It's one that's moving at a cycle of 100 and one's moving at a cycle of 600. They're not moving all at the same time. Same length.
Right, which would give you, instead of returning, if they moved at the same time, it would actually be a demonstration of rotational movement. But by moving at different rates, you have spiralic motion because it never quite returns to the same exact parameters because you have another influence, which is the evolution of the entire system at play. So I agree with you. Yeah.
It's sort of kaleidoscopic, perhaps. And then there are times, of course, when they're out of manifestation, when they don't seem to be moving at all. So it must be quite magical to see and quite confusing.
Yeah. If you reach a level where you can see it, maybe you're beyond confusion. Who knows?
Maybe.
Anyone else?
Some drugs involved. Yeah, Yvonne had her hand up too. So let me see if I need to. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, the planes rotate, or the rays come in north to south, and these are the 7 rays, and they're coming into each of the 7 planets at the same time or at the same rate. But the planets themselves are all rotating at a different speed, right? And then each planet may be at a different level of evolution. So maybe that would, make a difference with the speed of the planes rotating east to west of the evolution of that planet and the humanity on that planet. It just seems so many variables.
They aren't there, though. I mean, first of all, you have to keep from being totally bewildered. You have to look at causal levels. The literal rotation of the physical planets is one kind of cycle. But these 2 rotations are in the abstract, right? Because we're talking about the planes of being, physical, astral, mental, Buddhic, Atmic, monadic, and Adi planes of being that are rotating, right? Each in themselves, their subplanes, and the plane to which they all belong, while at the same time you have these 7 rays rotating. Now, my guess is that is causal to how the planets cyclically manifest their ray potency and how their physical cycles manifest in the outer world, which is not causal. It's to be studied, but it can be studied, but it's not the source of the energies represented, if that makes any sense. So yeah, these two, they're certainly related. What you were just describing is going to be related in the sense that what we're looking at here is going to be causal to that phenomena. Anyone else?
Yeah, we have a number of comments still. Brian says, is there any information on the reversing of the wheels in regards to the etheric and esoteric and monadic planes? Because if the first three worlds are brought into alignment, shouldn't everything else fall in place, theoretically, as one would then be unified on the Buddhic plane?
All I can say in answer to that is that the reversal on the wheel is certainly going to occur in rhythm with this double rotation. Just how that might manifest, would be a secret of initiation, would be, true occult science, causal science, right? But I think, at our level of understanding, all we could do is, introduce the possibility that a disciple's reversal on the wheel, which happens in Libra and Scorpio, is definitely, or it would seem, we could hypothesize that it is connected to the influence of this dual rotation. Anyone else? Hello?
Sorry, I was muted. We think the chakras as vortexes, so these vortexes are very difficult to exist and penetrate the subplanes with all these rotations on the physical body. No wonder every time we have a change of energy in our system, the opposite energy rotation exists until you are able to conquer the higher vibration. I guess the moment that cycles coexist is the best time for initiation, expansion of consciousness. A portal opens like two vibrations that got each other the point of the guest vibration and points of vibration. And then she clarifies, it says they work together.
Well, I didn't get all that, but what I did get was having to do with the chakras. The chakras are not causal except to the dense physical. They're responsive to energy from the soul, which in itself would be, as I see it, responsive to this dual rotation. So the soul, because it is immersed in knowingness, right, in the source of intuition, would intuit the best times for incarnations, the best times for as the successive series of initiations, right? And that the equipment, which are the chakras, would mirror those energetics that are, you could say, are optimal, for change and movement, but wouldn't be causal to it. Next.
Brian would like to speak. Let me see if I unmuted him. Yeah, you're self-muted. Go ahead, Brian.
Yes. I'm not trying to act like I know it all because I certainly don't. But I was going to say this is the first webinar I've ever actually attended, and I'm finding it quite interesting that y'all are talking about the wheels, the planes, reversing the wheels, and how the different things work. Because I've been working on exactly that. There's a new formula that some people are working on in esoteric astrology, like Walter Poland and some other people, in regards to what is called a triple wheel astrology chart. that includes the monadic chart, the esoteric chart, and the exoteric chart. And I had really already figured out that there was actually a triple wheel chart before, encompassing basically the three lower.
Brian, I'm going to have to interrupt you. It's just too far off subject. I can't.
I thought
we're just going to have to stay a little more closely to this text. The reason it being that it's quite difficult to apprehend this material, and so if we just put it on hold and entertain other subjects, it's very difficult to paint a cohesive picture. So I'm gonna
sorry. Okay, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean it's fascinating and interesting and really and genuinely, but it doesn't have its place right now, right here. Okay. Thanks though. Appreciate your interest and your participation.
Sorry, and then Robert has his hand up. Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I wanted to play off something that a few people have said, including you, Francis. In terms of the dual revolutions, I agree that the chakras are reactive, but in terms of the idea that, for example, the chakras are to be lifted, the stomach into the heart, etc., then it's as if they are fighting each other. And this comes back to that whole thing about the 7 fighters and the 8th they're fighting against. In a sense, a lower chakra has a resistance to being pulled by the higher chakra. And I think there's an analogy here between the planes and the rays. In other words, the planes or planets, if they're rotating, they have their own rotation, they have their own inertia, and they want to stay in their own vibration. But the rays come to them and quicken them and change them, and they resist that. They struggle, they fight. And the rays, maybe in that sense, can be seen as coming from the sun, who is struggling with the 7 fighters. Anyway, that's just a potential way to look at it.
Well, that's interesting. Especially, I don't think the planes in and of themselves struggle against ray influence. So, it's possible because they're embodied by ray lords, but I mean by plane devas. But the influence on a disciple / initiate, the fact of somebody who has their consciousness on a particular plane, for instance, if once you gain the 3rd initiation, you become soul infused, and so you're relating to Buddhic consciousness, then the revolving ray influence would certainly affect you. In fact, that may be one of the great purposes of, and means by which evolution takes place, is the processing of these revolving ray influences on each particular plane, right? So it's going to affect you where you live. And it's then going to affect your chakric system, which will mirror that effect, because, we also have to remember that there's your astral body has chakras, and your mental body has chakras, and though we don't hear anything about it, we can assume that all the sheaths going all the way up to the highest sheath, as sheaths, as bodies, have their own chakra system, and they're going to mirror the influence of this dual rotation. At least so it would seem. So thank you for that.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think we got them all for right now.
Could I interject a thought?
You certainly may, Michael.
Okay. The cardinal directions used for the rotation may be symbolic. When we look at the circle that you have up on the screen, north and south is a vertical line, which could signify an interaction or relationship between spirit and matter. Whereas the east-west orientation, the horizontal line, should be interaction within states of consciousness itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting to look at them subjectively like that, and that the constant rotation then would show a different type of interface between, for instance, spirit and matter. A progressive interface within a given cycle. Right? You make an important point. This sentence here underscores the point you made. In connection with these two types of spheres, we might, by way of illustration and for the sake of clarity, it's like there's no way that you could know that the truth of this in terms of directionality, but in your world, we could use these terms east, west, north, and south, but they're almost symbolic of something that's more, seems to me, more causal in terms of direction. For instance, this may happen at levels of dimensionality where these directionality has a very different meaning, but it's already complicated enough, right?
Part of this exercise perhaps is to rise out of the concrete thought into the more abstract.
You could, if you remember all the way back in the proem, HPB says the main purpose of writing this material is that you move into abstract thought. Is it, so exactly what you said.
So there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Okay. So moving on, and perhaps more relevant to our study, how does this dual rotation enable the Lapika lords to, quote, do their work? Now we've lost sense of the context, but that was the, we'll get to it in a minute. One possible partial answer. For those Lapika lords working with future karma, one might suppose that certain opportunities for change, growth, and initiation would come through specific plane ray alignments. And so it would be timed in accordance to those alignments. Clearly, the effect of the dual ray plane rotation is a field of study in and of itself, which, due to lack of further information, must, largely remain unexplored, at least by us mere mortals. Though we took a pretty good shot at it, I think. So, a word about the image in relation to the Lapikas. First, as mentioned before, it symbolically delineates the, quote, four quarters of the sky, the four quarters of Lapika influence. Second, when viewed three-dimensionally, the circumscribed equal-armed cross can be used to symbolize the dual rotation of planes and rays. You could see that, that it indicates the direction of motion, with the vertical arm representing the north to south axis of the ray rotation and the horizontal arm the east to west of the plane rotation. It's noteworthy that this symbol, which so aptly describes the Lapika lords, is the standard symbol for the third logos, with which the Lapika are so closely related. Right? The Lapika are the second seven. The first seven, who's the third logos, is symbolized by this sign. So you can see this symbolical interaction. Well,
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
You have a couple of comments. Christine says, is there any confirmation that turning to the left is to the moon and to the right is to the sun?
I don't know if there is or not. That's certainly how I see it. It's, almost universally the left side is seen as the form aspect. He talks, for instance, about the left eye being the eye of form and the right eye being the eye of spirit. Yeah, I would say that it is an apt and appropriate metaphor, that the left side is the moon. It's the material aspect. The left-hand path is the dark brotherhood, represents the dark brotherhood, which is materially focused and oriented, whereas the right-hand path leads to spirit and is the path of the Great White Brotherhood. So, and is also solar. So I would say yes. Anyone else?
She says, yeah, there's a little more. She says, I do this in dowsing. And I just also wanted to point out that, another connotation of it is the left is the moon, which is the past, and the right is the sun, which is the future.
Interesting.
And so we're, because that's one of the things. The moon is the prison of the soul, because it's it's the past patterns that keep us down, that we haven't been able to move beyond. So anyway, just wanted.
And we also have that past karma being worked on by one group of Lapika lords, and then future karma by the other. So that's interesting. Yeah.
And then
I almost called it HPV, but you're not quite there yet.
Yeah, no. I only have 2 initials. She had 3. And Britta says,
next slide.
Britta says, I'm wondering if HPV with this suggests some relevance as to the astrological charts, the ascendant descendant axis and the ICMC axis.
We all await your book on that subject. It's, you could apply this at so many levels and to so many fields. It seems to me the very essence of motion in the manifested universe, right? That it somehow represents the nature of motion in the manifested universe. The directionality, some indication as to the quality of that motion, right? And yet there are no specifics, of course. So I would think it would have a definite impact on all astrological considerations. Now to get specific, I wouldn't know even where to start. But it's certainly something to be meditated on. Okay, anyone else?
Britta adds, that will be next lifetime. I think referring to the book.
Well,
we all have things that you've given us for our next lifetime. So,
well, I commend you on your optimism. Okay. Any last thoughts, questions? We're at the end of our time together.
That's all I see. I do want to say that our next webinar together is the 1st of November, The Secret Teaching of All Ages, and it will be at 8 p.m. GMT, because that's the morning that we here in the United States switch to normal time, standard time. I believe Europe is doing it next weekend. But anyway.
Okay. So instead of being confused, simply take it upon yourself to look up when 8 o'clock GMT is for you, wherever you are in the world, right? I think the point of making the shift from 7 to 8 was that it would stay the same in the U.S. Isn't that correct? Local time, stay the same local time. So if you're in the U.S., it'll be the same local time as it is now. But otherwise, make sure and check it out. There's all kinds of ways to find out. what
Right.
that is.
The
Okay.
point is that it's 8 p.m. GMT.
Not
And
7.
the next one, the next Secret Doctrine is going to be November 15th at 8 p.m. So,
Okay,
and
which
all
is
of
4
these,
weeks from today.
right, all of these are already loaded in the program, so you'll see them when you get your notices, your reminders, and when I post the information to get your copy of the video so you can watch it again and again and again, because there was so much stuff in here.
Yeah, and again and again. And I've just had this, which is I myself have been really surprised at how interrelated these two webinar series are becoming. That there's information described in the various mystery schools. And right now we're on the mysteries of Odin, or the Udanic mysteries, that are being discussed and described in the Secret Doctrine series, right? So they're definitely related. This is all just a pitch to have you all come to both of them. So until then, November 1st. We'll see you then. And thanks so much. It's really a privilege to me and for me to host this series. I'm really enjoying it. And thanks for your feedback, because it's through the feedback that we go deeper into this material. So thank you for that. Okay. See you next time.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.